coordinator of the Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy and Human Rights of UCLG. I would like first maybe to make some comments on the first session we just hear on the importance to make the links between global trends and local realities. We have heard how they could be this relationship could be shaped in a better way, trying to analyze the global trends through also the local perspective challenges that we have been hearing. Mr. De Schutter was highlighting that we need to be imaginative, and in this sense, of course, that we need to foster collaboration between civil society organization, local governments, and UN Special Rapporteurs. That's our responsibility, and that's why we are here today, to see how we can make how we can take a step forward in this collaboration, concretely engaging with civil society movements, but also with the local government and their constituency, to make these challenges concrete and the responses also. So we will launch the second roundtable. Maybe we could have the slides. So during this second roundtable, we'll be exploring how we can foster systematic collaboration with civil society and local and regional governments using different existing and potentially new mechanisms. I would also say that in this context of the pandemic, of course, we have seen a lot of impacts on the way to think the policies, to think the challenges at the global level, and I would also like to ask the special rapporteurs how they have been affected in the work, and what are the paths that could be open for innovation and adaptation to respond to the new challenges, and especially in this context of collaboration between our different kind of stakeholders. I would invite Mrs. Dubravka Simonovic to maybe share her first comment on that. We heard the really interesting experience of Iztapalapa. The mayor was sharing the way they are being creative on local policies, and the way they are being very active to respond to this challenge. Maybe it could be interesting to hear how you see potential collaboration with this experience that we are hearing from the local perspective.
Thank you. From perspective of my mandate, it is really very visible that this collaboration is very much needed. And at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, I have issued a call for all stakeholders to send me very clear examples and information and data about lockdown measures and their relationship with gender-based violence against women, because at the beginning it was not clear if there is increase, or the statistical data from many countries did not show immediately increase of specific forms of gender-based violence against women, but later on it was clear that there is actual increase of different forms of gender-based violence against women. But basically, from reports that I have received from different NGOs, it was clear that during the COVID-19 pandemic, they have received resources from different governments. They had specific challenges related to services that they provide to women victims of violence, because many shelters were closed due to lockdown measures related to COVID-19 pandemic. And then it was clear that cooperation between local governments that are also providing financial resources to non-governmental organizations, but also to shelter possibilities that were replaced during the COVID-19 pandemic with possibilities for victims to go to hotels. It was clear immediately that we need to have a creative approach with respect to implementation of measures that are needed to prevent violence against women during COVID lockdowns, and specifically to focus at violence at home. So, for example, in some countries, non-governmental organizations invented specific codes how victims are sending messages in pharmacies when they are victims of violence against women. They were requesting specific mask with specific number that was kind of a sign that they are victims of violence, that they need help. And in general, in my report, I have emphasized important modification of measures that are needed during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, protection orders should be also issued through email or online possibilities, because sometimes it is easier to use such avenues during the pandemic. And then also in many countries, helplines that were not sufficiently developed before the COVID, then they have instituted helplines during the COVID pandemic in order to open up different possibilities for women to access different services. So I think that this collaboration that is really needed between non-governmental organizations and local governments was really visible during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that we need to learn a lesson from this, because all those measures that are needed to prevent violence against women and to provide many services are related to good cooperation between local governments and non-governmental organizations that are operated with respect to those measures and special procedures. Like my mandate, when we are visiting states, we are going to such local places. We are seeing our recommendations as a global recommendations that are addressing the whole state, but they are based on what we are seeing at the local level at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simonovic, for your sharing your thoughts, maybe highlighting also that during the Cities Are Listening experience that UCLG has opened over the past months, we have been hearing the importance of the local policies regarding this violence against women, and I think we also understand as a constituency the importance to have to these local choices made, and we heard the experience of local governments who had opened this helpline you were talking about, 24 hours, these shelters, and we hope that we will have a strong collaboration with you to support this kind of policies made by local governments. I will now give the floor to Mr. De Schutter. Maybe if you could also share your thoughts on the how we could foster this collaboration. I'm pretty sure that you have heard about a lot of initiatives coming also from local government, like how can a local government promote, for example, universal income or build path to equality. So it would be great to hear you on how we could better work together on that. Thank you.
Many thanks, Amanda. I have to say, I read in the chat box a message from Annelise Melendez, but it's in Spanish, and I'm sorry, I don't understand. So if someone would be kind enough to summarize this in English for me, I'd be delighted to answer. I'm sure it's important and relevant to our discussion. Now, I think one major difficulty, not so much with NGOs, but with the collaboration with local governments, is that we are not very well trained to understand how they're organized. So, for example, I am, of course, familiar with the network of the United Cities and Local Governments, UCLG, which is a major network of cities, and I know about the Gwangju process. But then we have the Human Rights Cities Network, we have Eurocities, we have various different networks whose work in the areas that relate to our mandates we are not always familiar with. So it is not very easy always to identify the best interlocutor with respect to the local governments. But I think it's really important. And in part, Amanda, this is for the reason you indicate. I think at the local level, experimentation is really more realistic to pursue than at higher governance levels. And for example, I've been working quite a lot on an initiative of French municipalities, which is called Territories Zero Long-Term Unemployed, Territoire Zéro Chômeur Longue Durée. And this is an experiment in which now 60 municipalities in France commit to having no long-term unemployed under their jurisdiction by providing employment, subsidized employment to these unemployed persons, which is actually less expensive for them than to subsidize unemployment benefits. It requires some coordination with the the national level that provides unemployment benefits, and that shall subsidize this initiative. But it's the right to experiment at the local level that is being promoted here. And I think it's really important. Let me give you another example. On 19th of January, just a few days ago, there was a decision by the European Court of Human Rights in a case called Lacatus versus Switzerland that considers it's a violation of the right to respect for private and family life to impose a fine on a person who was begging in the streets in Switzerland and had been fined 500 Swiss francs, which that person could not pay, so that she had to spend 3 days in jail for being unable to pay the fine. Now, this is a lesson for all municipalities, right, who do not know whether their approach to people begging on the streets is acceptable from the point of view of human rights. And I would very much like to have interlocutors amongst municipalities to share that judgment and to identify the best practices with respect to how to deal with these issues. But not very easy for me to identify the right interlocutor. So again, this is one long way of saying thank you for allowing this dialogue to take place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I will now go to Michael Fakhri, because food, well, right to food has been one of the topic which has been raised during the pandemic, not an easy topic for local and regional governments, but a huge preoccupation that we're raising among our constituency at UCLG. We have heard a lot of experience of local government and also local organization really developing new initiatives with, for example, providing food baskets, or also trying to make better connection between, as you were mentioning, rural spaces and urban spaces, creating this kind of local ecosystem regarding the right to food. So the same question, how do you think we could, during your mandate, support this kind of policies, initiatives led by local stakeholders and responding to the priorities that you have been presenting on the first part?
Thank you, Amanda. So admittedly, I'm new to this space and to these different networks. And so step one is, me just showing up, which these days is becoming more and more difficult, So just let me start with my general theory of change and then get more specific. So for me, before you have a good idea, you need to organize. And of course, you need good ideas, but you need ideas that help people organize and come together. So for me, change comes from organized movements, and it comes from new relationships of solidarity, new friendships. And the difficulty of the pandemic, there's two difficulties that's been at play, is one, it's made inequality even worse. Some people are better off because of the pandemic. Some people are richer, some people are going to come out better, and most people are slipping behind. So the pandemic is not done yet, as someone pointed out. So we're all coming out more tired, weaker, harder to organize. Social movements, and I want to be specific. No, we're using very loose terms now, NGOs and civil society. Social movements, specifically in trade unions, are suffering and are having harder time representing their own interests. So that voice is being, so for me, I'm trying to think, what can I do and others do to empower people to articulate their own demands, right? A city, any government is only as powerful as its people in the end. And there's a difficulty as a UN special for the UN Special Procedures System, and I think I'm one of the newer ones amongst my colleagues. I started in May in the midst of a pandemic. The only way I know being a special rapporteur is yelling into my computer all day in my attic, right? And I don't expect I'll be able to travel. I care for a young child. My spouse works as a public defender, so I have my own labor negotiations in my own house, right, that are at play. And I'm lucky, my family is relatively lucky. So I'm acutely aware of, I only know this as a pandemic job, right? We're all volunteers and we're all stretched really thin. So what I've learned as one of the newer rapporteurs is it's so hard for us to collaborate. We all want to work together, right? We all really want to help each other out, but solidarity and friendship amongst special rapporteurs is even harder today, right? So I've spoken to David, but I only know David as a face on my screen, for example, and so events like this is wonderful. So I can't express how important today is, and I don't take this event for granted. at all. And I immediately wonder if we can make it more regular. Is there a way, just like how we have a direct institutionalized relationship with national governments, to do the same with city governments, local governments, regional governments, institutionalize, regularize, so we can have new friendships? And what I've learned from the pandemic is, after this is all said and done, as if we can imagine a post-pandemic, let's pretend we can imagine one, right? But after this is all said and done, I'm going to travel less, but then when I do travel, it's going to mean so much more. So the importance of that interpersonal, the importance of new friendships, the importance of sitting for a meal, the great irony is, for me, having a meal with someone is everything. You learn everything about each other, huh? And I can't do that in my work. And so I think that this network and this group of being able to organize, for me, that's the key to everything. Organize the special rapporteurs, basically, is what I'm asking you to do. Organize us, tell us what to do.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to work better with you on this different dimension. And our Secretary General was saying that this is exactly what we are offering. So so we'll go next to our last special rapporteur, Mr. Boyd. Same question, maybe just reminding you that UCLG has been also very involved with the environment agenda, and very committed with the Agenda 2030 and how to localize the SDGs, but also how to better highlight the commitments of our membership towards this main challenge that you mentioned, which is water, air, food, non-toxic environment, safe climate above all. We have been also approaching this notion of defending common goods, and that's something we are exploring currently. So same question for you. Thank you. The floor is yours. Mr. Boyd? Maybe, can you hear me? Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just having some well, you know, we have the COVID pandemic, and then we also have problems with internet access sometimes. So listen, I think that my key point after hearing all of this discussion and this very interesting series of ideas today is that a human rights city has to be a green city. And there's so much that local governments can do to promote both human rights and sustainability. So whether we're talking about transportation in the city, you know, prioritizing safe infrastructure so that people can walk, so that people can ride their bikes, so that there's an effective and efficient public transportation system. When we talk about green spaces in the city, I mean, to make a livable city, you need green spaces, and those green spaces have to be accessible to all. And those green spaces will also help protect and conserve and restore biodiversity. So green spaces, blue spaces, air quality. I mean, we haven't really talked about air pollution, but air pollution kills 7 million people every year, many of whom are urban residents. That's over 100 million people who have died prematurely from air pollution just in the last 20 years. And so there's very interesting economic literature and research that's been done that shows that the costs of addressing air pollution and the benefits of addressing air pollution, while simultaneously addressing climate change, actually work out to net benefits. So $1 invested in reducing air pollution produces health benefits that are worth more than $1. So it's just terrific investments, and cities have a huge role to play, whether it's reducing pollution from transportation, industry, open burning, or even people using antiquated cook stoves in their homes that are creating huge amounts of indoor pollution, which then also influences outdoor pollution. Access to safe drinking water and adequate sanitation facilities, another responsibility that often is held by local governments. And so, you know, the whole list of actions that are needed today to bring us to fulfilling the right to a healthy environment is really a lot of it falls on the shoulders of local governments. And so finding ways that we can work together to bring more resources, more capacity to local governments to tackle these challenges, I think is one really important structural change that needs to be made. In a lot of countries, local governments simply don't have the tools or the resources to address these problems that are really being felt at the local level by their residents. And so I think that's critically important. And I spent a number of years prior to becoming the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment. I was the co-chair of the City of Vancouver's Greenest City Initiative in Vancouver in Canada, an absolutely beautiful city. And what we learned in the process was that you have to put equality and human rights at the heart of it in order to move forward effectively. I'll give you one tangible example. You know, we did a complete mapping. We wanted everyone in the city of Vancouver to have access to a green space within a 10-minute walk of their home. And when we mapped that out, we found that there was one area of the city where people didn't have access to green space within a 10-minute walk, but that was in the wealthiest neighborhoods where they had these, you know, huge lawns and huge residences. And so we thought, well, we don't really need to spend our limited resources making new parks, new green spaces in the wealthy neighborhoods. So we looked at it for a different indicator, and we came up with green coverage, basically the tree canopy. And that's where we found that there were fewer trees, fewer plants, fewer greeneries in the poorer parts of Vancouver. And so that's where the city is putting its effort. So really prioritizing the needs of the most vulnerable people will help us to achieve green cities, human rights cities, and healthy cities together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your comments here, Mr. Boyd. I would like now to invite the representative of HIC and Global Platform of the Right City to share with us the first reactions. We know that Mrs. Allen is not with us today, and Yolande, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello again, everybody. And best greetings and apologies also from Adriana Allen, who is the HIC president and was not able to make it at short notice today. Thank you for your interventions. I think they really echo and reflect a lot of what HIC and the Global Platform for the Right to the City have been thinking about and talking about, particularly in light of identifying collaboration and more regular institutionalized spaces for collaboration between local and regional governments, special rapporteurs, and various civil society networks. For HIC and the Global Platform, the importance of sustained and cross-cutting collaboration between multiple human rights areas remains important and valuable. And the various points that were raised here and that we would like to raise again very much highlight the aspects that were mentioned in the last roundtable in December 2020. And I'd just like to highlight some of those key aspects regarding systematic collaboration here once more. Given the context of, or that traditional international human rights mechanisms are largely state-based, it leaves a limited margin of action, especially in terms of the variety of actors that can become involved. And so one of the key points that we'd like to make is that there is a need to advance stances of plurilateralism. This is a term that our president, Adriana Allen, had coined in the last round table as well. And by that also really referring to cross-cutting collaboration. And within that, emphasizing the key role of cities and local governments, as well as civil society actors and academic actors. And of course, such an approach can only take place when discussion and deliberation becomes accessible. And this is where we believe civil society networks can play a critical role in bridging this gap of accessibility, particularly in making the work of special rapporteurs even more accessible to community groups, in terms of tools, mechanisms of engagement, and language used also in various reports and communication methods. And then, of course, due to the impact of COVID-19, we also need to look at other modes of collaboration through online activities, as has been mentioned. And on the one hand, while the digital divide is ever increasing, it also offers an opportunity for certain grassroots organizations or certain groups to participate in dialogue and conversations that they perhaps before were not privy to or had access to. And so what is the practical proposition that we are bringing to the table? And that's really engaging with the question that you had posed, Mr. Fakhri, around what could a sustained collaboration and stances of more permanent consultation look like. And so between the three co-organizers of this event, UCLG, HIC, and the Global Platform for the Right to the City, we have been talking about the possibility of an advisory group that would consist of local and regional governments, civil society networks, academia, and that would cut across and bring together different special rapporteur mandates. And engaging in the various mandate thematics in a transversal cross-cutting manner. And one of the added benefits of having such sort of different and varied actors in that space would be to be able to include a wider scope of data in the reports that special rapporteurs produce. And being able to sort of focus data on different levels and how certain human rights dynamics are played out locally and not only nationally, which I think was a dynamic that was mentioned as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yolande. I would like now to invite Dr. Gyeonggu Jin, Senior Advisor for Human Rights and International Affairs of the city of Gwangju. Gwangju is in South Korea and one of the leading cities of the human rights cities movement. Dr. Shin, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you. You need to unmute yourself. Perfect.
While I'm listening to the presentations, I began to feel that we have a long way to go in the future in terms of human rights. So South Korea in general, we have come quite a lot to make the country more democratic. So last year, the democracy level of Korea was ahead of the US, probably partially thanks to Donald Trump for the past 4 years. And then it was because the democracy movement in Korea was very strong. We have also a very strong movement in environmental movement, women's movement as well. So in terms of environment measures, we have come quite a lot. And then women's violence against women began to be punished severely, and then general awareness on violence against women have come a lot higher. But still, we have quite a lot of limitations. So, for example, in terms of food, poverty, which we handled today. So, food and poverty generally, we do not consider them as an issue of human rights, for example. So we have to expand our scope of understanding. But luckily, in Gwangju, we have some system, as Mr. Teshada mentioned, kind of Gwangju process. So we have a system, 3 systems I can handle. So we have a human rights department in the city hall, and then we also have a requirement for all city government officials to be educated to take courses, 4 hours a year, human rights courses. So, and then we also have World Human Rights Cities Forum, which we began 2011. The Gwangju International Center began to organize it in collaboration with UCLG from 2014. So I want to focus those 2 issues of human rights education first. By the education, the human rights issues have become mainstream in city government management. So all the human government officials or government employees are comfortable with the human rights, the idea of human rights, even though that idea in Indonesia is not so welcome, because for the last, under the dictatorship, human rights was suppressed. It was a word of like subversion. But in Gwangju City, it has become very much comfortable to everybody, and then it was the basis for the management of the city, or city ordinance, city policies. The second one I want to share about the device of World Human Rights Cities Forum. The annual forum has become a kind of device for the local government and the human rights activists are getting connected in the meeting. So it provides grounds, platforms for immigrants, different sectors of the people, including the vulnerable classes. So through that mechanism, we have learned a lot. And then we are expanding our scope of understanding. So I'm sure that Gwangju City is becoming more and more human rights friendly. And then because we have been exposed widely to the general issues of human rights, now we are learning about the food, poverty as one of the issues of human rights. Hope in the future, I hope to work with you, like Professor Michael Falconer for food, and then Professor Olivier de Schutter on poverty. Hope I need your involvement in the future and your expertise. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shin. Indeed, the World Human Rights Cities Forum is one of the examples on how we could build a better structural dialogue between local government, UCLG, and the UN mechanism, and that's have been improving over the year. Also, maybe mentioning that Gwangju, as other city of UCLG, has been contributed a lot to the annual reports of some special rapporteurs, especially on the right to housing. That's something, also an idea that could be explored. Also with participation to the Human Rights Council session, and we had different moments where we have been fostering this dialogue in the Human Rights Council session with side events, and exploring this kind of collaboration that we are looking for today. And we also hear a little bit before in the discussion the importance of the country visits and trying to see how we could engage better the discussion and the dialogue, the consultation between local governments, local stakeholders, and special rapporteur during these country visits. No, so that's maybe the different also ideas that we have been experiencing during the past years of collaboration. So I would like now maybe to open the floor to the participants and asking Mr. Wilco Beck, Director of Citizen Alliance, to make some first comments.
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to talk to different special rapporteurs. We normally engage with the special rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, so this is extremely welcome. And it's important to also share with these special rapporteurs that from our side, it has been a long battle to get city and regional governments recognized as credible development partners internationally. And the battle is not yet won. We still struggle sometimes with member states, but also with development partners, development agencies. And so when these special when you as special rapporteurs go into the country, it is enormously helpful if you make clear that you want to engage with subnational government, with the local governments, with cities as cities. In that regard, though, I would ask you also to pay particular attention to the reality of secondary and intermediary cities, because these very often get lost and the debate gets stuck at the capital or at the metropolitan level, as important as they are. from our perspective, the bulk of the development challenge happens in small and medium-sized cities whose names are not really known. And where you get to that local level, you see that they become, in effect, sites of social exclusion and poverty through policies on land, on services, on economic opportunity, health and education, and critically on representation, on voice. And so not only would you need to look at smaller cities, but be very clear about the fact that most of these cities, many of these cities, are dominated by the informal economy, both in terms of reproduction, shelter and housing and access to services, and also in terms of economic opportunity. Both of those will bring right to the fore both the development role and the leadership role of women in these communities. So let me conclude with just two key variables. One is, in many of the countries in which we work, local governments, city governments actually have a very weak legal status and recognition from the national government, and very often do not have the capacity or resources to fulfill the mandates that they have been given. And so this is a real issue that weakens the role of local government. And on the parallel, particularly in this environment made worse by COVID, there's an absolute absence of funding and resources to help build organizations that represent the urban poor. Funding is going to projects and things that can be photographed rather than building this capacity. And just in concluding, I think the point that Olivier de Schutter made about the line of delivery between the local state and the community organization, civil society, is a key debate that we would be very much welcome to expand much further. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. I'm seeing that there is a Rocio Lombera who is also raising her hand. That would be our last intervention, as we're running late already. Thank you. Rocio, the floor is yours.
Sí, muchas gracias por estar aquí en esta interesante plataforma que nos permite intercambiar pues, muchas cuestiones que son relevantes para fortalecer la acción tanto de la sociedad civil como de los gobiernos locales, y en este caso justamente poder canalizar muchos planteamientos a través de los relatores especiales. Gracias por las palabras de todas y todos. Dos, tres comentarios que queríamos hacer desde Iztapalapa a raíz de las palabras de los relatores y de los comentaristas de la plataforma global de HIC. Saludos también a nuestros compañeros. Hay muchos gobiernos locales, porque decía el señor de Schutter que pues sí, ahí está siempre esta dicotomía entre la tecnocracia y el estar abajo, ¿no? Con la gente, pero yo creo que hay muchísimos gobiernos locales, el caso de Iztapalapa, que es emanado y hermanado con las luchas sociales. Emana de ahí, emana de los movimientos sociales. El caso de Gwangju también es destacado. Y ahí hay una serie de prácticas sociales en los diferentes temas que se han tocado aquí: medio ambiente, alimentación, violencia contra las mujeres, en fin, que han sido prácticas sociales exitosas o con mucho aporte, y que han logrado escalarse a ser políticas públicas de gobiernos locales gracias a este hermanamiento, y que amplían entonces la posibilidad de cobertura gracias a los recursos que están en juego y tienen un mayor impacto en beneficio de las poblaciones. La cuestión de la integración y transversalización de diversos programas para responder al conjunto de derechos, y también de diversos actores y ámbitos, desde lo social, lo gubernamental, lo académico, lo público, pues ha sido una cuestión clave, yo creo, para poder dar cuenta y poder responder a la profundidad de las causas que implica la violación de derechos, y creo que eso ha ayudado mucho en el caso de los programas y acciones públicas que hemos lanzado en Iztapalapa, esta integración de una serie de elementos de derechos. Nuestro lema principal es Iztapalapa con derechos plenos, y ahí hemos articulado programas en términos del cuidado del medio ambiente, ampliando las áreas verdes, la producción alimentaria a través de huertos comunitarios que a la vez engarzan con procesos de economía solidaria, como tenemos un programa del campo a la ciudad, que trae del campo mexicano, pero también del campo local, productos hacia las colonias populares, en fin, los sistemas de cuidado, ya se decía. Hubo un programa muy importante en la pandemia que queremos colocar, que articula muchos elementos de los aquí dichos. Mercomuna se llama, todavía lo continuamos hasta abril, esperando salir de esto. Es mercado, comunidad, abasto y alimentación, justo algunos de los temas colocados, que consiste en que el dinero público de los impuestos de los ciudadanos se transfieren a 200,000 familias prácticamente en Iztapalapa, mes con mes, y es un vale moneda, una moneda local prácticamente, que se aplica solo en los comercios de barrio, en los comercios locales. Por lo tanto, ese mismo recurso beneficia a las familias, beneficia a los comercios locales y también se devuelve de alguna manera el bienestar ahí al conjunto de la población de manera muy amplia. Entonces, esta integración, esta transversalización es muy importante. Ya Clara decía en el programa Siempre Vivas todas las instituciones que están, tanto del gobierno federal, local y de la alcaldía, ahí, y de la sociedad civil, en fin, organismos autónomos. La perspectiva territorial que manejaba Nelson Saule, algo muy fundamental porque es lo que, como un método de trabajo que da cercanía, que da inclusión, participación, y por último lo del cambio cultural que también se menciona, manejar los elementos, los lemas, los nombres, los símbolos, en fin. Creo que para esta relación entre gobiernos locales, sociedad civil y relatores, además de lo planteado por Hick, creo que podríamos pensar en un mecanismo más permanente y cotidiano para poder estar intercambiando preocupaciones, problemas, soluciones, o sea, un espacio donde podamos estar en relación más constante y no tan intermitente o luego tan larga, ¿no? O sea, si hubiera un espacio donde podamos mandar unas pequeñas fichas desde los gobiernos y establecer también una parte que sea de preocupaciones que tengamos día con día en lo cotidiano, experiencias que pensamos puedan ayudar a tener, y datos, incluso datos concretos de cómo está esa problemática en nuestras ciudades, sería algo interesante. Gracias.